When these boys fall and we do the get up, thing, it's short-circuiting his ability to share he's hurt. And without the safety of that, it's okay. Come here for a second. A lot of men go through life hurt, broken, damaged, but because the outside world says, if you saw me in a car crying, people would probably wonder what in the world's going on. But if they saw a woman, it's a different reaction, right?
Welcome back, everyone, to First and 15th. I am Carol Bush, and I am so excited to be talking to Patrick Patterson today, who has so much information on just fathers, families, life in general. So I'm going to do a brief intro, and then Patrick, you can also tell who you are. So Patrick is known as Mr. Fatherhood, which I think is an amazing title. He is so deserving of it. And so we will definitely find out more about how you got that title and how you also got just this whole movement of helping fathers and families. So just tell us more about what you do, Patrick, and who you are, and then we'll get started.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol, for the opportunity. Um, Hello, everybody. My name is Patrick Patterson. As Carol mentioned, I'm a father of two. My oldest is 19. She's in college, sophomore. My youngest is 17. And I'm married to my high school sweetheart, Sharani Patterson. We've been married since 1997. So we're in year 27 of our marriage, and I'm a social worker. Like you, Carol, I love giving. My specialty, not because I've asked, but it's because it's been awarded to me, has been men. Um, so I've worked with fathers, men, and boys, and it's something that is birthed out of my relationship with my own dad. So it's a special, special thing. But undergrad degree in social work, I went to HBCU in South Carolina, Benedict College. Shout out to the Tigers. Uh,
HBCUs?
HBCU, and I went to USC, the University of South Carolina, for graduate school. So I'm a master's in social work, master's in public health, but just really happy to be here. Really happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so again, I am thrilled now. I have known you for, I'll say over 15 years. And so I
Absolutely.
have watched your growth from starting out with working with dads where you are now. So let's just talk about how did you even get this interest? I mentioned your dad, but how did that help you to want to work with boys, men, and more importantly, fathers?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. Um, my short story is I grew up in South Carolina, um, two parents, as a young boy, and then about the age of 15, my parents separated. And not knowing how important my dad was incarcerated before, and he used and drank, but that was prior to me being, I'm 50, in 74, I was born. He stopped. And so for 15 years of my childhood, my dad was in the house. He didn't finish eighth grade, but he was pretty adamant that he wanted good for us. So, like, we lived in the projects. My dad told us, we're leaving here. And, we didn't know because he worked three, sometimes four jobs. But my honest truth, Carol, looking back on it, my dad was my hero. Um, he was left-handed. I'm right-handed, and everything I did in sports, I did left-handed, hoping to develop a dominant left hand because of him. My dad was very dark-skinned, um, but it was a cool thing, right? So he had, if I remember this very well, I mean, he had two cuts on his face. He had a cut that went this far and a cut that went this way. And so as a kid, I played all kinds of sports. If I ever got into an accident and I got cut on my face, I had hoped that I would have the two cuts because that's how much my father meant to me. Afraid of dogs, I am today. But when my dad was around when I was a kid, I wasn't afraid of dogs. Um, I mean, he gave me comfort. I'll put it like that. And about the age of 15, Carol, my dad started back drinking, which I had never seen as a kid. my older two siblings had seen it, but I never seen this. So like I can remember being in high school. This is junior, senior year of high school, and when my parents separated, all I knew was both my parents. I recall being in class and like having a teacher say, Patrick, this is after they separated. And I was just distracted. Um, Never said it because I didn't know the words to articulate it at the time. But I remember being an okay student, you know. But when I finished high school, I had a 1.3 GPA. And I don't blame my father, but it definitely affected me. And so most of my young life, where I went to high school and my HBCU, they're probably a mile apart. So imagine being a high school senior, going to football practice, having football games, and on the way, there's a guy asking for money or a guy laying in the cut drunk. Um, that was my father sometimes. So amazingly, um, I found a way to smile through it, but I was so hurt uh, on the inside. So to answer your question, I didn't pick fatherhood. This thing picked me. But
Yeah.
here's the last thing I'll say. Um, in all of those issues with my father, one of the things I'm grateful to my mom for this. She would always say, if you see your father and he needs something and you have it, give it to him. She didn't badmouth him. She didn't say wild things about him. I mean, she was still asking us to respect our father. And so I'm grateful to her because of the space that she kept me and my siblings, because oftentimes I was wanting to like avoid him, or I wanted to say something, I wouldn't have done it, but emotionally I wanted to just scream at him. But it chose me. And so we'll get into it, but like he's still my inspiration 20 some odd years later. Big time.
And that is so powerful that number one, you chose to still have him in your life because you could have avoided him altogether. But also with your mother,
Yeah.
she had enough love, not just for your dad, but for you and your siblings to
Yeah.
separate her feelings of how she felt for her ex-husband
Yeah.
and how she felt for her kids to give honor still to their dad. So
Yeah.
despite that, he was out there on the street
Yeah.
and you could have turned away. Like you had enough compassion to still
Mhm.
have him in your life, not no, I guess close by in terms of like I can touch you and hug you
Yeah.
because I want to hug you, but like you still would acknowledge him. Is that
Yeah. Yeah.
fair to say?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, he was such a force. He was I'm 5'6". He probably was 5'8", but my dad was a force. And it wasn't even with words. His presence was very strong. And one of the things I remember vividly was, and this is how I kind of, there's a stretch in my life with my dad, Carol, that I was angry, so my mother say, call your dad. I would call him because I respected her, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to talk because I'm like, dude, you left. But I remember one of my best high school football games, and we won and the whole nine yards. And my father, even a little bit inebriated, um, I saw him the next week. He said, I heard about you. You're doing good, boy. It's just the
Yeah.
affirmation
Yeah.
that he gave me. My college was a mile from where I grew up. I went to Benedict College, and when I graduated, this is back in the day, it was in the gymnasium, um,
Mhm.
in a crowd of 7,000 people. I don't know. My father found his way to my graduation.
Wow. Did
Now,
you see him ahead of graduation or was it after?
no, no, I didn't see him.
Oh, you didn't see him at all,
Yeah, I saw him
but
in
he
the
was
neighborhood.
there.
I didn't say come to graduation, but
Yeah.
it's just ironic that in most of the spaces that I needed, his presence, even in the middle of his stuff, he found a way to be there. Um,
Right.
So when I think about my father, and how I got this work. You mentioned the word compassion. Like later in life, I got a sense of his story.
Hmm.
And once I learned his story, my heart was hardened a little bit, but it kind of thawed out because I realized, wow, I never even knew why this dude was drinking. Um, but there's always a source.
Yeah, there's always some kind of a backstory. So let me
Yeah.
ask you this.
Yeah.
Was your father's father in his life, or was he present as your dad was growing up as a kid?
Yeah. My grandfather was, this is old school Southern stuff. He was in the house. He had two families.
Okay.
No secret. No
Mhm.
secret. Um, he was a very strong personality. And my dad, who I respected, my dad was scared of his father. So my grandfather was there, but it wasn't the, God bless him. I mean, but it wasn't the best example. Um,
Mhm.
and if you listen to my dad tell stories, my grandfather, when they were young, he would, this is back in the day, but he would hit them with pieces of lumber, um, pieces of a water hose, straps. And he, to hit one of them out of the blue wasn't a bad occurrence. It happened.
Mhm.
So to your point or to your question, like when I tell you I unpack my dad's story, that came out about their relationship. And so my father was a very prideful man. So he wasn't going to sit and say, man, I'm hurting today. Um,
Mhm.
my feelings are hurt. He's not going to do that. He's going to work. That's how he dealt with his pain, right?
Yeah, he
But
would he would just go on and just carry on as if nothing was bothering him, even though he knows that these things are still affecting him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But my grandfather with us, I mean, he was a teacher. I mean, my brothers and I shot guns with him, taught us how to use a knife to sharpen a pencil. I mean, he was that kind of hands-on guy, but their relationship was different than our relationship with my grandfather, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard that, in terms of just how sometimes the grandparent is like a whole other version of themselves
Yeah,
because the grandkids are not, their actual birth kids. They can go home, they can
yeah,
limit how much time is. So like the grandkids are then getting the best of version of, say, grandma and grandpa. So yes.
yeah, 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 yes, yes.
I'm actually going to pause and switch my little binder
Okay,
to the
okay.
side so I can glance over better. Of course, like this will not be in the actual video.
You're good. You're
Let
good.
me
You're good.
changing
You're good. You're
my
good.
little notes.
I love your interview style too, Carol.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I just like talking to people. And
yeah,
so I used to hear as a kid, well, I remember actually in first grade vividly, I was told, and I don't know whether it was a classmate or whether it was my parents, that I talk too much. And
yeah.
so and that was first grade. So you're maybe, I don't know, 7, 6, how about
Around there. Yeah,
in the age range. And so I made a pact at Eva Turner Elementary School, first grade, Mrs. Goodwin's class, that I will be silent as long as I could. So I was a good student. I love school. So I would answer the question and
yeah,
then be quiet. I would go home, answer questions at home if need be. Other than
yeah.
that, I was silent because I was told by someone who I guess really, really was important to me that I talk too much. So that was my punishment. Let me just be quiet. And here I
At
am
that
now.
age, at that age, you heard that?
Yeah, I was in first grade. I remember so clearly, Carol, you talk too much. So I'll be quiet then.
Wow. Wow.
And so here I
Wow.
am now having a whole YouTube show, and that I don't call interviews. I call them more of a conversation because I
Yeah.
like, just to really pull out all of the nuggets and wisdom that people have, because people can learn from so many people that you may not even know that that you can gain wisdom from, you from other guests. So I'm all about sharing the light and the love.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and look at you now, you're talking all these years
Talking with
later.
thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what was your first experience showing compassion to fathers? So you mentioned your own father, but aside from your dad, what was your first time you can recall actually giving this compassion to a father?
Yeah. I think it was probably at church. I mean, my mother, I mentioned my dad a lot, but my mother was a force. It was four of us, and even in the midst of what she could have been going through with my dad, she kept us in church. Um, every Sunday, every Saturday for choir practice, and then Wednesdays. So
Or Bible
I'm
study?
grateful. Oh yeah,
Yep.
I'm grateful for her because she kept us kind of structured, even though there was chaos around us. But I remember doing feeding the homeless things at church. I recall when I was in undergrad, every time I wrote a paper, if they gave us like a free assignment to write,
Mhm.
this is in the 90s. I would write about my dad. Um, I'll never forget this church invited me to do like a men's ministry something. And this is before I was a public speaker, the whole nine yards. But I remember the connection, a young man I was, to these older men just about my father. And it was the first time and I get nervous when I speak, but it was the first time I wasn't nervous. Um, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. And the response was so good. I mean, I'm a young man with older men, and the men in the room were just kind of emotional about my story. And I realized, like, wow, I could probably do something like this, but there was no fatherhood field. Um,
Yeah.
so that was probably the first time, but it's hard to answer that without talking about my own dad,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I think when I got to a space of doing counseling, seeing him for who he is, not for what I had hoped he was, is probably the most transparent moment that I had. When I could say to him, after I heard his story, like I'm sorry. Um, I wasn't the best son in those years, but that has become kind of like the thread of my life is to extend grace to brothers. Um,
Hmm.
when I see men who are crying, when I see men who are frowned, kind of got the face on.
Yeah.
When I've gone into prisons talking to guys, I do what I did with my dad. I I don't judge first. Um, I try to listen first. So that my dad was probably first in that space. But every day when I meet boys and men, it's really a chance to just kind of give them space to tell their stories.
Something that actually makes me really, really happy is that okay, so I'm going to assume that you were a teenager during this time or like a young adult. Were you like teenage years?
When they separated?
No, when you were with the church. So like with the men's
Oh
ministry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was about 19, 20.
Okay. So
Yeah.
something that actually we did as a family, and let me phrase that, my dad. So we talked about him on prior, off camera, but with my dad, he did not have his birth father in his life. Actually, this is something that we are still unpacking as a family with my brother and sister and my dad. So the man who he was told by his mother is his dad was not his dad.
Mm.
And so we both know that in the South and the North, it doesn't matter a matter where that those kind of lies, because these clearly are lies. They're not secrets. I mean secrets, but these are lies. Saying that so and so kid, your dad is this person, and then you get attached to that person on that man as your father figure. Then you learn later in life that he is not your father. And so with my dad, he is 70. And so he actually just learned at age 68 who his birth father
Wow.
was. And I say the word was because he passed away, I believe it was early 90s. And so with my father, he actually was a guest on my podcast. And so he shares
Wow.
some of his story about just his upbringing and some of the reasons he is so tough on the outside, but we as his children and those who know him well as well know he is so compassionate. He
Yeah.
is so helpful, but also still at this age of 70, still has walls up just due to his own background. So like going back to with the prison ministry, I recall very vividly, probably in middle school,
Yeah.
he was so active at a boys prison in Maryland that it's still around to its day. That's actually still in effect. Actually, and so he would go there and just spend time there. And so growing up, my brother, who I love tremendously, was not raised in our house daily. So it was just my a sister and myself. And I am the oldest in the house, but I'm in the middle. And so I would actually wonder and I would ask my dad, why do you spend so much time, with these boys and like trying to help them? Because you already have a son, you have two kids who live at home. So why do you feel the need? And so he actually then took me with him one time. So I could not really go in all the way because I'm a teenage girl, but he was able to just show me firsthand that
Yeah.
experience of helping these young boys. And that's something that I value in fathers, that when they see a need to help others, that they do it because there are so many men, as you know, Patrick, and boys
Yeah.
who need a dad, who need a father figure. And so, like my dad, even though he didn't so but even though at the time that he was doing this, he thought that the man who was his dad, he still, gave of himself. And so that's something, that I will still unpack with my siblings and dad because I'm like, this is really important, Dad. Like you felt something missing and you don't know what it was, but like you just gave so much of your time to helping boys and men. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
prison ministry, I know about those.
Yeah. I think, the perception of most men is that we are hardened souls, but in the safest spaces, we're some of the most gentle
Mhm.
individuals. But, when you walk outside for you as well as for me, sometimes there are forces that don't want you to
Mhm.
be happy, right? Um, you might have more of a chance of talking to your sister, or if it's somebody who's in a sorority,
Mhm.
they might talk about what just happened. You're qualified for a job, you didn't get the job. You're overqualified for the job. You didn't get the job. You should get a raise, you don't get a raise. You could probably get on the phone and talk to 10 people at least in your phone. Most men, when they have those kind of disappointments or heartaches, the first reaction is not to go home and call 10 buddies. Most guys will, and this is generalization, but they'll drive for hours and just process it. And so what I've learned over the years, Carol, is most of us are kind of wired to hold it in.
Mhm.
And when that happens, it's like a Coke bottle that has been shaken. Um, when it finally opens up, it's it splatters on all kinds of things, even unintended things. And that to me was my father's story. That to me is the story of a lot of men and boys,
Yeah.
who since they were, I think about, I have nephews, I have only daughters, but I have nephews that I've said in my own family, when these boys fall and we do the get up, thing, it's short circuiting his ability to share. He's hurt. And without the safety of that, it's okay. Come here for a second. A lot of men go through life hurt, broken, damaged, but because the outside world says, if you saw me in a car crying, people would probably wonder what in the world's going on. But if they saw a woman, it's a different reaction, right?
You're right. Unfortunately, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think, even as you talk about your own dad, I mean, my greatest like element of my development has been learning my dad's story, um, and the sacrifices that I didn't even know about,
Mhm.
because he wasn't going to come home and say, those shoes y'all got. Like I had to work 3 jobs to just buy those
Yeah.
shoes for you guys. So if I had like dreams about doing this work before, it wouldn't be where I am now because his life has changed my life. And I take it very seriously, but I cannot miss the point about the anger that I felt in those years. And there are a lot of men and women who have their own issues with their fathers, but they don't know their father's story. They know these behaviors.
Hmm.
Like I knew my dad's behaviors, but I didn't know the genesis of the behaviors. But he was assaulted in prison. Um, he was abused as a child. No, nothing that he would have said, "Hey, son, let me tell you
Right.
about it." But those things were just kind of packed down. And it's like a trash can with food in it. If you don't empty it, it starts smelling a little bit.
Right.
But the level of like perseverance, because my dad went to work, even with all the stuff, he went to work every day. Um, but I realized when he started back drinking, it wasn't just my parents and him. It was the dam broke. Um, all that stuff, it just couldn't contain it anymore. Um, and so when I think about you and me and even this interview, I know there are folks listening who some might have had a similar dynamic with their own fathers. I always ask the question, do you know your father's story?
Right.
And if you learn that, um, it might not change things, but you get to understand things, if that makes any sense. So,
Yes, it gives you empathy and
yeah,
the compassion. And so it also then that goes back to the actual child, if they have actually healed enough to even accept the story of their father. Because like yes, you may hear a story, but if you are not open enough or healed enough, you'll
yeah,
hear it one ear out the other, or you just ignore it. Because I mean, it really takes healing from within to then even
yeah,
accept those, those stories, those experiences of our fathers.
yeah, yep, yep. And grace, and
Mhm.
extending grace. He didn't arbitrarily not go to eighth grade because he wanted to quit school. I mean, ninth grade, he had to
Yeah,
work. He had to work.
yeah,
So, when you hear that kind of story, without people, I know people talk about, oh, you're making excuses for him. No, it's the reality of his journey. But even with men, and I always talk about boys, like we have such a powerful opportunity to let boys feel. Um, it's okay, when he's hurt, break up from a girlfriend in high school, as opposed to the joking that occurs, when boys, with boys particularly. It's okay to give him permission to like feel. I'm not saying soften him, but to give him permission to be himself. And it's so interesting when I see boys who have been to counseling, been to therapy, and to see how empathetic to, you mentioned the word just now. It's a stark difference to a hardened soul. I work with boys in prison. I mean, those boys have so much packed in there, which kind of ends them up in the condition that they're in. So,
yeah, you were right about that, Patrick. I mean, just empathy. I mean, that goes a long way and can solve so many problems. And you made a really good point in terms of the way that that boys that when they are hurt as children are told, to get up, and stop crying, like shake it off, that kind of thing. And that is such a a common way, I'll say, that that boys have been raised who are now men. And so like I'm with you. You have all daughters and I have all, and the same for me. So with my husband, his his dad was not the most positive figure. So he was in the household. It was a two-parent household. They were married.
yeah,
His parents were, but he was not the kind of father that my husband needed. And so something that, that as a dad of daughters with both you and him,
yeah.
do you find yourself wishing or wanting to have had a chance to then have a son. That way you can be the dad that you always wanted.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I mean, we have two children, but we've had three pregnancies. So like our first pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. Um, and you can't tell me that it wasn't a boy. I knew it was, I just knew
That's
it
the
was.
same thing my husband says for when we had a miscarriage. That is Patrick. I mean,
Yeah,
literally, he says the same thing. That first baby would have been his son. And I said, well, you don't know that, but like he has this feeling, that little infant, well, to me, not infant, but that the miscarriage would have been a boy. And I don't dispute it. I don't know, but just hearing that also from you.
yeah,
So what I'm going to say, which I think is a fact now, is that
yeah,
even though the mom is the one who was carrying the child, the father has innate feelings about them too, because clearly, like you had a sense that miscarriage would have been a son. So I
yeah.
know
I
that was a
knew it.
bit off topic.
No, 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 you're good. I knew it was, but I love our girls, but I do sometimes, and I'm grateful because it was 8 years before we had our oldest, and that was a lot of fasting and praying. Um, that was also a good space that my wife and I, we were focused, but we became connected.
Mhm.
Um, prayer lives, it's something powerful when both of us have the same goal. It happens. And that was us. But if I had a son, I would definitely probably do some of the things I do with my daughters.
Okay.
Like my time is all my girls want. We used to buy all kinds of stuff for Christmas, but time is a thing. I have nephews, and you can ask my entire family. I just enjoy the roughhousing. I enjoy the conversation about girls with them. I enjoy the conversation about who they are. I've been very intentional about saying to them, "You're special." And since they were little, two
Mhm.
are in college. One is 11, he's in sixth grade. But since the two that are in college, when I come around, since they were little, I would always whisper in their ear, "You're special," or "You're awesome." And it got to a point, Carol, where they would, you know, that's come here when they were young. Come here. They said, "I know I'm awesome," and that was my entire goal because I know when they go out here,
Mhm.
they might not hear that as often. But if I had a son, I think about it some days, but my heart is so full with gratitude because of
Oh
our
yeah,
journey.
of course, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
you have your beautiful wife and daughters who are your family. And so, like when you were mentioning that with the boys, I was thinking that sounds like Jason because girl dad.
Yeah. It's a powerful thing, though. It's a powerful thing. And you
Definitely.
guys love, to have your father's, I won't say permission, but even approval, but just the validation.
Hmm.
And I can tell you, my oldest, when she went to college, I mean, she come home and piercings and tattoos and things of that nature. And she would
Hmm.
often ask my wife, and they'd get into a conversation about it. And then she'd ask me, and I learned very early on, my words mean a lot to her.
Hmm.
I mean, actually, they mean everything to her. Um, so as she's been developing, my oldest and my youngest as well, I'm very conscious of what I say to them.
Hmm.
Because I made one mistake. My oldest was 4, and I told her she did something, and I said to her I was disappointed in her, and she hid from me for about a week.
Wow.
She wanted
At the age of
nothing.
4. And
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
yeah.
so young.
She's 19 now, but I remember telling my wife, like, I don't know, I didn't do anything. I mean, I just told her. And my wife, who's a daddy's girl, she said, "Listen, you broke her heart, because she always wants to make you be proud." And so I have never made that mistake again. And I've counseled them, I've given them guidance, but
Hmm.
I've been very thoughtful about the use of certain words. So
Hmm.
very important.
Yeah, you are so right. And so I'm just reflecting on some of the things because my dad was raising two daughters in the house and our brother was not living there. So
Yeah,
he was not there, daily as the interactions. And so okay, so
yeah,
you got a girl dad in my father, a girl dad in you, Patrick, a girl dad in my husband. So there's a whole lot of girl dad, daughter dad kind of things, that even as a grown woman who was 43 years old,
yeah,
I am still thinking, wow, this has an impact on me from when I was a kid. So then let me tell my husband and me as well, like not to say certain things to our daughters because I don't want them to then grow up and then have some of the same feelings of, I wish my dad or mom to would have not said things a certain way, but because my brother can take things differently than me. And so that's a whole other thing new that I still need
yeah,
to work on. So a
yeah,
friend of mine said, Carol, you need to go see a therapist. And I said, yes, you were right. I need to go see a therapist because clearly I acknowledge that as a grown woman, I have father issues still. And I even
yeah,
told my dad, I was like, Dad, we need to have a heart-to-heart talk. Even though
yeah,
I'm your child, I'm grown. So let's talk about some of these things that happened as a kid that are
yeah,
impacting me as an adult who is now a mother of daughters. So,
yeah,
right
yeah.
on, Patrick.
No, it's a full circle. I mean, I've been doing therapy for 15 years and I never wanted to do it, but my wife encouraged me. I had my dad leave a message. We had an answer machine back in the day. Uh,
Hmm.
and the holidays, he'd be sober for whatever reason.
Okay.
But this one particular day, he called, left a message on the machine, and he said, "Boy, call me." That's his message, right? And I remember saying two words after he left that message. My wife heard me, and the second word was "you." Um, and my wife was like, "F you." My wife said, "Listen, Patrick," she said, like, "You still dealing with some stuff." I kept saying, "I'm good." She's like,
Mhm.
"No, for a voicemail to take you there that quickly, like you need to, you know, talk with somebody." And I give her a lot of credit because she didn't just tell me that, she actually went with me.
Okay.
And because I wouldn't have gone. If she had booked the
Hmm.
appointment, I had booked it, I wouldn't have gone because I just kept saying to myself, I was actually afraid to open up some of the stuff. But
Hmm.
the process of talking to somebody, to your point about that counseling and therapy, it didn't solve it, but it gave me a way to understand it.
Hmm.
And the compassion that I have now in my work starts with my own dad. I mean, the grace that I think we both exchanged
Okay.
changed us. So, if anybody's listening who's considering counseling, I'm a proponent, huge proponent of it.
That is so important, just for, I'll say, Black people, Black men, Black women to get past the stigma. I can definitely see differences in the, I guess we're Gen Z, whatever Gen we are. I don't know which Gen we're in, Gen X, Gen Z, whatever is the is
Yeah,
like the is the age range of being born in the 70s to the
yeah,
like early 80s. So I could definitely see that, that with our generation, we are not as scared, I'll say, to
yeah,
even try therapy. So we
yeah,
know that with our parents and grandparents, it was taboo.
yeah,
It was not something that we did, but no, but I but no but no but as we have evolved as human beings, I'm definitely so grateful for people in the Black community, as well, for just opening up and seeing that it is okay to talk about your feelings, whether it's a therapist, counselor, whether it's a father figure. So that leads me to my next question.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. So we've talked about the impact of your father because he was your hero. He is your hero. So how did that even lead you to have this impactful role with others? So like you have compassion, you have empathy, but then what actually led you to then want to help? So, uh,
yeah.
Fatherhood chose you as the movement, but you didn't say no because you are in it. You are in the thick of it. Like you are helping men and families worldwide. So how did you
Yeah.
even get to that point?
Yeah, I think I was not aware, but I was helping myself by doing this. Um, it was therapeutic to be in a room with men. I also learned that I didn't have it all bad. I mean, I know men who've never met their father,
Mhm.
period, and women.
Mhm.
So it also helped me to realize, like, to stop with the violin. Um, you didn't have it as bad as some others, but it also gave me an appreciation for my dad's story. But professionally speaking, when I was in undergrad, I was a social work major. Like I told you, I was writing about my dad. This is in the
Right.
90s. When I got to my senior year, we didn't do a thesis, but we had a senior paper. And my senior year, I wrote a paper called The Differences Between Successful and Non-Successful At-Risk Students. And I was considered at risk.
Mhm.
Um, and what I found in my senior year of college limited research was that it was a positive father or a male figure. And the senior paper that I wrote, Carol, this is how God works,
Mhm.
in my life and in our lives. The senior paper that I wrote, this is 1997. There was a group in South Carolina that was just about to start a fatherhood program statewide. The senior paper that I wrote somehow got into the hands of the CEO of the foundation. Um, Never met the foundation was also in my neighborhood, but we didn't go that way. We went this way.
Right.
So so I was going to graduate school at USC. I was going to do a 1 year program to get my master's in social work. And this gentleman reached out to me. He said, "Hey, we about to start this fatherhood program. I had just gotten married, by the way.
Mhm.
And we need somebody who understands the issue." And I kept saying to him, like, I understand the issue because my own father, la 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 la. He said, and it's a statewide position. I said, well, I'm about to go to graduate school and I'm not a father. I kept saying that, I was trying to disqualify myself.
Right. Mhm.
But he said, but you understand the issue. So when I say it chose me, so the other point that he made was there's a program at USC that allows you to get two master's degrees at once. And the foundation was based in the hospital. So they encouraged me to go after two. I was going to do 1 year to get my master's in social work, but
Mhm.
to do both masters, it was 3 years. And he said, we'll pay for your education. When he
There
said,
you go. Come on now.
so this is all in the same time frame from senior year going to grad. This is 97. And
Mhm.
we'll start you off by letting you intern with us. But in your role, you'll have a chance to, travel state. And that's all God. I mean, I can't even explain it. But it was in my same neighborhood that this foundation existed. I started working with, it was a Catholic foundation. So I was working with nuns, but it was the first place that I had a professional role doing what I loved. And I did that for 3 years, traveled the entire state, met with new fathers, veteran fathers. My dad and I, at the same period, Carol, was still in the same neighborhood and we see each other here and there. And I can't not tell you this piece, but like I've been married 27 years. I would have gotten divorced in my first year of marriage if my dad hadn't told me something. Um, I was 21, 22, 20, maybe 22. When I left my mother's house, I was paying the light bill or the cable bill, this and that and the other. And about 6 months into my marriage, I saw my dad in the neighborhood. He knew my wife because we dated in high school. He was like, "So how's it going?" I said, "Bro, this is not working." He said, "Well, what's going on?" I said, "Well, my wife and my mother were pretty tight before we got married. Um, and then we got married, and then they did like this." And I was explaining to him, I said, "I don't understand why they not getting along. I mean, they have always gotten along." And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I do this and that." And the other. He said, "Are you still paying bills at the house, at your mom's house?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, let's talk." And my dad told stories like I do to get to a point, but he said, if your mother needs shoes and your wife needs shoes, and you can only buy one pair of shoes, who gets the shoes? I said, that's the craziest thing ever. I said, Mama. He said,
Okay. Okay. So,
he said, no, your wife gets the shoes. So he said, I'm gonna tell you to do something that's probably gonna make your mom upset. But you need to go to your mother's house and you need to tell her with your wife in company that you're no longer paying bills at the house. And so my heart beats fast now thinking about it because my mother, she's strong, right? And she's firm. Um, it took me 6 weeks to do this. That's how nervous I was about doing this. But I went to my mother's house, took my wife with me. We're still newlyweds. My wife at the time wasn't a hand holder. Um, we get to my mom's house, Carol, and my mom is in the kitchen cooking, and she's happy to see us. And I said, Mom, I need to talk to you about something. And she's like, What? I said, Can you come in here?
mhm.
My wife had no idea what's about to happen.
Oh, okay.
She
So
has
she
no
just thought it
idea.
was just like, okay, so
She has no
your
idea.
wife thought it was just like a regular visit, just,
Bye-bye.
but got it.
My mother comes in, and I said to her, nervous and all, I said, Listen, from this day forward, I'm not paying, the whatever I was paying.
Yeah.
And my wife is looking at me like, and I said, unless Sharani and I agree,
Mhm.
um, I'm not paying. I was scared to death.
Right.
I'm not paying any more bills in the house. And my mother said, "Oh, boy, that's all you want to talk about," and she kind of dismissed it, right?
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but I knew she was mad because that's her
Mm,
way of doing it is ignore you. Um, So she dismissed it. She went back to the kitchen. And that Sunday, I'll end the story with this. That Sunday, we went to church. My wife and I, we were going to another church. I went to my home church. My mother sits in the same seat today.
mm,
And after church, we didn't talk since that meeting. After church, I went to speak to my mom, who always got excited when she saw her kids. And she was talking to somebody, and I was standing there. You can see me standing there.
mm.
She ignored me the whole time, which tells me how mad she was from that conversation. So I saw my dad a little bit later, and I told him, I said, "Bro, I did what you said." Um, and Mama is pissed. He said, "Your mother loves you. I know her longer than you know her. She'll be fine. But what you need to make sure is that your wife is always number one." And so we left my mother's house. I missed this part earlier. We left my mother's house. My wife is not a hand holder then, but my wife, when we walked out the house, she grabbed my hand. We didn't even talk like that, but I mean, she grabbed my hand and it was almost I appreciate it that you took the courage to do that. But so many stories in my life, Carol, where I was at a crossroads at the work, career, my marriage, my own development, where I saw my dad at these perfect times
Come on, Patrick.
and he had the answers. He had the answers. Wisdom was one of
Right.
the gifts, but professionally, I just try to honor him by just being authentic. Um, I'm very transparent. Some people get a little bit annoyed when I say I was angry with him, but it's the truth.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, those are real feelings. And if
it's
you
the
feel
truth.
anger towards your parent, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
normal.
The thing that has helped me though is when like I said earlier, I heard his story, but we exchanged I'm sorries. And the anger that I felt most of my 20s, um, I can't explain how those two words mean to people, but when he acknowledged my feelings, and just said, "I'm sorry," I mean, it seemed like it all melted um, away. And until my dad died in 2015, I mean, we became friends. Um, he saw my oldest, and I still remember one of our conversations that I share with guys now. It was about the power of your words. Um, he didn't. talk a lot, but when he spoke, he meant what he said. But I never forget telling him telling me I had my oldest in my arms. She's probably 3, and we got spanked. I mean, we got beatings back in the day. He wasn't the one. My mother was the one that did all of that. I mean, if he did, it was rare. But I recall him saying to me, Carol, my oldest, he said, "You're done well." He said, "Don't beat them girls." And my first thought was, dude, where was this thinking when I was a kid? Because y'all gave us the business, but it was some of the best advice I ever got. Best advice. So his connection and what he's done for me makes this a profession for me. And before he died, he saw me as Mr. Fatherhood. He saw me in speaking engagements, and I would tell stories about him. He never wanted to be on a stage, but I'd always say, and the man I'm talking about is, and my dad looked the same. He didn't smile a lot, but he was really proud of me. He was really proud of me.
That is so beautiful. And I use the word beautiful on purpose because even though I don't have sons, just knowing how at times men
Yeah.
are hardened. Their mothers and fathers may not tell them nice things. They may not give them a compliment. And so I'm going to say, Patrick, that is a beautiful connection with your dad, with your dad and you, because despite all the things he was going through as a man, you never let go of your love for him.
Yeah.
So
He's my
that is,
he's my hero. He is my hero.
yes,
Yeah.
present tense, he is your
President.
hero.
Yes. Yes.
So we've talked about South Carolina, how back in 97, sorry, 97, 98, you were going up to graduate school. You were not a dad back then, but you were working with a fatherhood organization. So let's talk more about how your fatherhood work grew from that one point to a pivotal moment
Yeah.
that I will ask you about.
Yeah. So I grew up in South Carolina. I worked at this foundation as an intern through graduate school, and I worked there for 3 years, from 2000 to 2003. And I was professionally speaking, I mean, it was like a highlight of my life because I was doing what I love, traveling the state of South Carolina. In maybe January or so of 2003, at the time it was President Bush was in the White House, and he was coming to South Carolina for a meeting of some sort. And I was doing what I love, and he was wanting to speak to somebody who did work with fatherhood, women in work, and it was some other topic like abstinence, I think, or something like that. And I got a phone call um, to come and meet with this individual in Charleston, South Carolina. And my wife and I, no kids at the time, we drive. I can't tell anybody. They did a whole background check on me. They, make sure I was safe to be around. And I get to Charleston, and the day before, they give us a room. They have seats assignments, and oh God, this a U-shaped table, and there's 2 seats at the front. And the first seat it just says president, and then the second seat it says Patrick Patterson. So
You're like, is that me,
I,
Patrick
yeah,
Patterson? Me?
yeah, I'm like, wow, God, this is interesting. The next day happens. My wife is in a hotel. She can't come into the event because she wasn't cleared security wise. They never checked. She wasn't supposed to come. So I'm in the hotel. She's in the hotel. I'm in this event. What I didn't know was it was a political rally. And at this place we met, there was a high school gym with 3,000 people in it. And I sat next to the president of the United States, and he said to me, "Why do you do this work?" And so most places I get nervous about speaking, but this was my story. And some of what I've shared about my father, I shared briefly with him. And I said, I believe men can. I believe fathers can. I just left it at that. End of the story is he goes out into the rally, 3,000 people. My wife is in the hotel. This is being telecast. And as he gets up, I'm at the edge of the podium. I'm sitting down in the crowd. He says, South Carolina, I just met the most amazing man. Patrick Patterson, where are you? My wife is watching this on TV, by the way. Uh, there's nothing is planned. And I heard my name, but I didn't register. And then, the person next to me kind of said, like, I had to wake up. I got recognized after the meeting. He gave a few folks orders to come and speak to me. People were all asking me, "Who are you? What do you do?" This whole thing. This is before Facebook, and 6 months later, they were just starting to hire fatherhood specialists in the federal government, and I was offered a job to do this federally, which I had never planned to leave South Carolina. I had never lived outside of South Carolina at the time, and my wife and I, with prayer and just clear words from God that said move. Um, I moved. I had an offer in Boston, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Denver, and Philadelphia. And, truthfully, at the time, we picked Philadelphia because Allen Iverson was playing for the Sixers.
He's the answer.
The answer. So that was part of our reason for going there. But I left, and people assume if I had time, I'd show the picture. People assume because of the seating of that meeting, there's a picture of me and the president, and we're like laughing, but it looked like we were high school friends. But um, it took me out of the state of South Carolina. I haven't lived there since. I worked for the feds for 3 years, 3.5 years, and my life just continued to grow from being a fed to managing national fatherhood projects under Bush, under Obama, under Trump the first time, and under Biden. And it's just been a whirlwind. I've been to now 48 states and 10 countries
Wow.
doing this work, but that's how I left South Carolina. And I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful. Grateful.
That is so powerful. Now, I love to hear people's success stories because I'm a firm believer in just because a person is at a certain point in their life, there's always a backstory. And just knowing that from that one program in South Carolina, back when you did not have any kids, you were trying to run from them.
Yeah.
They wanted you because number one, you have experience in just knowing what men want. And number two, it was right in your neighborhood as well. So why
Right
not?
there.
And
Yeah.
like you would have had no idea from you saying yes eventually to this one program that would have led you to meet the president of our country and then a whole other level of just engagement afterwards. So I am crying tears of joy. I don't know if you can see it, but but it's because I'm like, this is just so amazing what happens when we say yes to something that maybe we are running from or hiding from, because you'll never know what greatness is gonna come.
Yep. Yep.
Patrick,
Yeah,
yes.
no. And my wife, that whole journey, everything I've been talking about, she's been, beside me the entire time. And there are days, honestly, Carol, where I doubt myself. I've had days where, particularly as I was moving up,
Mhm.
like, do I belong or do I have what it takes? And without hesitation, she would just, "Yeah, of course you do. Uh,
Yes.
you got." So now I have my own reminder, but there were points in my career where it got to be higher levels of
Mhm.
work, influence, reach, territory, and fear has been replaced with just absolute faith. Um,
Mhm.
Absolute faith. And I don't doubt what God is going to do. Obviously, I have questions and you want things to go a certain way, but
Right.
one of my greatest joys has been in my career is like taking your hands off the wheel.
Mhm.
If I had tried to orchestrate my life, I would have long time ago made a wrong turn. Um, I committed some time ago just to, as God leads me, follow. And my wife, I know people talk about marriage and submission and the
Mhm.
whole nine yards, but I truly believe that she's seen the lineage of me following Christ. I'm here, and then she's followed me. And I don't have speeches. I don't tell you get behind. I've never done that, but
Mhm.
I think she can see the the line of authority. And with my kids also, I just want to show them, and they know my story as well. I've told them about my failures as a student, my father, why I say and do certain things. I don't demean my dad. My dad was and is my inspiration, but there are things that
Yes.
he did that were incredibly helpful to my development. Um, and so I will say to them, I'm going to tell you I love you every chance I get. I didn't have that,
Mhm.
as much. So it's just so important. But my wife has been a rock. I met her when I was 16. She was 17. And it's just so important that those pieces of my journey, it's clear that she's been there the entire
Yes.
time.
She
Entire
has
time.
been with you since before day one of becoming Mr. Fatherhood.
Yes.
And so, on that note,
Yeah.
how did you phrase that? Okay, so you have worked with some major organizations. You
Yeah.
have traveled, you said, to 48 states and 10 countries working with fathers who can then, of course,
Yeah.
benefit their own families. So you've worked with McDonald's, NFL, and a few other major organizations. How did you get to that level of working with those programs? And then also, when did you know, Patrick Patterson, that I'm pointing at you
Yeah.
are Mr. Fatherhood because you own it. I am so happy for
Yeah.
all that you are doing. So when
Yeah.
did that hit that, yo, I
Yeah.
am that guy and I own it. I'm like, that's me.
I think midway through I think between the two kids being born, one is '05, one is '07. I started my own business. And it was only because I was a loyal employee, but there were boundaries that I couldn't do because of my job. And I'm a helper at heart, and I hate it telling people no. And I have a mentor who really, really strongly encouraged me to create my business. I don't come from entrepreneurs. My family are workers. My mother was a domestic. She worked on the other side of town for white families. My dad worked several jobs, didn't finish high school. But I was scared to death to start my business. But I was clear that people were calling upon me to do this work. And it wasn't 9 to 5. It was at men's retreats. It was in youth prisons. It was with football teams. It was in executive offices. And even in corporations, I've been asked to do trainings around male engagement, father engagement. And when it's that big of a pull, Carol, you can resist it. It's not wise.
Right. Agree.
Not wise. It is not wise to do that. So without any knowledge, I started with some help from a couple colleagues, created a business, and I was going to name it something Delaware, which is where I lived at the time. And a mentor of mine said, this before I travel extensively, he said, you need to name it something worldwide or global. I said
Mhm.
global. And I named it Global Partners for Fathers and Families. And the vision that I cast and prayed for started me on my way. So the first year of business, I was so afraid. I didn't know how to run a business, but I started taking invitations to speak. And honestly, you're in business. I didn't know what to charge because I was scared. Um,
Right. That
but
fear.
fear of upsetting people. I wasn't afraid to get paid. I just didn't want you mad at me for what I was going to charge.
Mhm.
So I would charge small amounts, and the money I would charge wouldn't even get me back home. I'd say, 2 hours, 3 hours, sure. I'm like $100, and people would pay it because he's like, oh, we got one. Um, and then I realized the value that I was giving to people. My wife helped me. She would go up me and take pictures, or she'd do video or whatever. And people would say, oh, you got to come back here every year. And I'm like, And the room is full. I'm like, wow, what? This isn't quite equal. They're charging a fare for all these people, and I'm getting this much in return. And this is where I started learning the value of your gift and the value of my gift. Um, and one of the things that we cannot regenerate, Carol, is time. And
Mhm.
I didn't want to be gone 7 days a week, and my kids are being, raised without me in the house because I'm serving other people.
Right.
Um, so my wife and I reversed it. My wife became my business manager. All the people that could get me to say yes for $50,
Mhm.
they couldn't do that with her. Uh,
Right, Mrs. Patterson, she was not. Come on. Okay, yeah. It takes a strong wife and a strong woman to see the passion to push her husband. And yes, the passion, you feel it.
yeah, she's protecting me too.
Yes,
Um,
protection.
So you mentioned boundaries earlier when we were talking beforehand, but I mean, so that became um, kind of our structure. And so it was odd to me when I know somebody I've known for 10 years to say, can you come speak for me? I say, call Sharon. They're like, dude, you right here. I'm like, and that's where our heart gets us in trouble, because they can
Mhm.
lean on you, right? And call Sharon. And my wife, I didn't miss appointments with my kids because I was saying yes to things without looking
Mhm.
at the family calendar before, just scared to make people
Yeah.
upset, insecure. But she like, no, no, no. They have dentist appointments. So you tell them they want you. You can come next week, but not this. And so it became a real partnership. She left her corporate job making six figures. She became my business manager, and the rest is history. I haven't pushed that I speak because as I've gone places, you kind of meet people and they want you to come to certain places, but that's become like the core of our business has been trainings with state government, trainings in hospitals, trainings in schools. You mentioned NFL. I've been in NFL locker rooms talking to professional players, and it's tied back to my own father. Um, so I don't know. Honestly, people say, "What would you do if you weren't?" I don't know what I would be doing, Carol. To be honest with you. So the business part, I got to say this: most of us like to do business, but none of us like to run a business. And I had to go from doing business to running a business, which is policies and procedures. I used to do PayPal. I mean, the federal government ain't paying me via PayPal.
I'm like, it's
So
like a
I've had,
scam. We're not going to use him.
so it's like leveling up. So I try my best to be coachable. I've been an athlete all my life. So if you got good stuff for me, I'm gonna listen. Um, and you don't have to tell me but once. So adding my wife, and now I've got 14 people that are on our team.
Mhm.
It's, I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful. I'm really grateful. So that to me is, if it's anything that I would say to anybody who's listening, and even to you, Carol, because I know your heart. I know where you're about to go. It's definitely managing your time. It's valuing your time
Mhm.
and then having the right team. And just so happens, my best teammate has been with me most of my life, my wife.
I love that.
So
I mean, that is just something that is just so powerful of of what happens when you have a partner, a spouse who is in your corner, who
but
wants to see you succeed, who will push you and maybe out of your comfort zone and say, okay, now Patrick, PayPal is done. We're going to have some kind of a platform that they can, send you an invoice. We're not doing
yeah,
PayPal. So like just those kind of things just makes me just even more grateful for all that you are doing for fathers. So
yeah,
I'm gonna give you some background, and the you is not you, obviously, because like, you already
yeah,
know these kind of things. But for the
yeah,
people who are listening and watching, that I had heard of Patrick Patterson back when we worked in the same agency, kind of. You were not there anymore, but like you had like just left, something like that.
yeah.
So this was back in '06. So are you still with the federal government, or had you already left? in '06.
I was still, I left in '07. I left in January.
Okay, okay. So I had heard of you, but I hadn't actually met you until maybe a few years later. But everything that I heard about you from anyone was always so positive. It was always, he is going places, he's helping fathers. And so I was thinking, I gotta meet Patrick Patterson because he is the man. Because no, I did not know you at the time, but I knew of you, and your reputation preceded you in so many positive ways. And then just me thinking about the work that we did as federal, and then when you were not with federal anymore, no, but I'm still in that field, and just seeing you go from '06, '07 to where we are now in 2025 is just amazing. And I am just so very honored to just see the growth and see how much you have, because whether it's Barbershop Buzz, a Fatherhood Clearinghouse, any work that that you are involved, that you are involved in with men is just astounding. And so I've been telling folks for years, like, y'all gotta follow him, like
Yeah,
find this book, like find where he's speaking, because I guarantee people that that y'all will learn something. And so I am just so
thank you.
happy for all that you are doing, because even though, again, I don't have sons, I can use some of the things I'm learning from you with my nephews,
Yeah,
the ones who are teens, the ones who are toddlers, because I just want all people to have, just the inspiration that even though you grew up a certain way, you don't let those things limit you. So that's my little spiel. But
that's good. Really good. You're speaking facts. Speaking facts.
you get facts, because I just am just so proud of you, Patrick. You have no idea. But let's talk about some of your successes. So we talked about some here and there, but I want to just drill down.
Yeah,
What are your two successes working with fathers and families, whether it's stateside or
yeah.
globally?
Oh, that's a great question. One success that I didn't see that I'm really proud of is 2015, 2016. I was in DC,
Mhm.
was at a black bookstore, Sankofa bookstore. It's not far from my house.
Okay.
Um, I was supporting a brother who had written a children's book, and I was just carrying his bags and just, filling the room. And afterwards, the lady who was a store manager or something like that, she was an older African American lady. She said, "Where is your children's book?" And I was like, "Oh, I do fatherhood trainings. I went around the question. She said, "Oh, you don't listen, do you?" I said, "No, I don't have a book." So she said, "You've been talking about your kids all night and your wife, and you should write a book." Um, so I had never known any real authors in my family, and um, she gave me her number. I lived in Delaware at the time. Got on the train, went back up to Delaware, and she said, "When you get there, ask your daughters, do they want to write a book with their dad?" And so I did. Asked them, and she said, "If they say yes, you call me." So I called her back, being obedient, and she said, "I'm gonna tell you how to write a children's book." And she gave me like a rubric, and she just gave me some counsel around that. And we wrote our first children's book together, me and my daughters. It was called "I Love When Daddy Reads to Me," and it's a book based on our lives. When they were little, I read to them a lot, and so that book has now been sold over 30,000 times. We've sold 30,000 copies of it. Never was in my wildest dream, but the connection to the book, my oldest, who's at A&T in Greensboro, one of the differentiating factors that got her in school was that she was an author, a childhood author.
Okay.
So we didn't see the book doing that, but I mean, it's played us. We've traveled together to speak it. Me and my daughters, my wife, we've
Mhm.
traveled together to speak. So that was one major success that um, will be here after I'm gone. Um, when
Yes.
they have kids, Carol, they will be able to share something that we did together. It's on every platform and Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, Walmart, Target. I mean, it's something that I'm so proud of because I was scared to death to do it. Didn't know what to do, but I followed the guidance of this young lady and
Mhm.
got it done. So that's one big thing that I'm really proud of. The second thing is supporting my wife.
Okay.
Um, she worked corporate America for years. She wanted to do an event planning business, and neither one of us come from entrepreneurial families. Um, Same time she started her business, I was doing a fathers and sons conference in South Carolina, and first time ever, 2015 or so. Um, my wife, I was her first client. Um, and
Okay.
so she had nothing but passion, had never been really trained, but just likes details. And
Mhm.
years later, I mean, she's been doing events across the country for the federal government, for high schools, for colleges. She's not like a wedding planner. It's like a corporate
Mhm.
event type deal.
Okay.
To see what she's done for me and to switch roles, so a lot of her events, she will have me be like a handler, moving tables. And it's my pleasure to be Sharani's husband. Um, so those two things are like everything to me. Everything. And she's happy.
Mhm.
She was happy in corporate America, but both of us wake up kind of with the spirit of gratefulness because we're doing what we love. So
Yeah,
that was huge for her because she took a risk leaving a pretty stable situation. But the books and supporting my wife have both been like major successes for me.
that is awesome. I know how your family is at the forefront of all of your success. Even though you are Mr. Fatherhood, like you're the one who was speaking to the fathers and
Yeah.
the men, you have not forgotten the impact of your wife and your daughters on your success.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Now, let's talk about the challenges. So, what would you say are your two biggest lessons learned
Mm,
with working with fathers and families, of course, nationwide and all over the world?
yeah. This is easier.
Okay.
A lot easier. Two biggest lessons learned with doing the fatherhood work. One is you can't help everybody. Um, in my early career, being a very energetic, empathetic, hopeful person, I would go to great lengths to try to convince you that you can do it. And what I learned in the process is that people won't change unless they want to. Um, so I've spent extra money. I won't say wasted, but spent extra time trying to help people who did not want to be helped. And that was heartbreaking for me. Um, so we talked earlier about the phrase compassion fatigue.
Mhm.
Right before COVID, um, I was just starting, things were just moving.
Mhm.
Um, and in the middle of COVID, Carol, I was getting opportunities to do trainings virtually. California, Atlanta, same day. You couldn't travel like that, but I could do it
Yeah.
virtually.
Yeah.
Um, I was burnt out because I was trying to help so many people, and
Mhm.
it made me focus on myself. Um, and so a lesson learned is just to put yourself in the order of your business. Put yourself first. Protect your space. Protect your energy. Protect your heart. Protect your time. So hard lesson learned because I honestly I had so many opportunities to do things, but there was probably a 2 month stretch, Carol, where I didn't even answer my phone. People were calling me to pay me to do
Yeah.
things, but I,
Right.
I was exhausted. And try to keep my family first and my wife and kids first. But I realized for the first time, I never knew what burnout was,
Mhm.
but I was burnt out. And so the new me, um, structure and schedule are important, but there are windows of access to me for people. Whereas I would take a call until 10 o'clock at night. Back in the day, there are windows of access to me. And I manage that versus people managing that. So
Yes.
somebody calls me at 9 o'clock at night. If I do text them, it'd be like, here's a link to my calendar. Um, Schedule a meeting, versus what was going to be 5 minutes is an hour and a half. My wife is sitting down here. My food is cold, you know. So that lesson I can't stress to people enough is to make sure you keep yourself in the order of your business first. Um, Hard lesson because I was broken. I was tired. And it was a good thing. I had so
Mhm.
much
Yeah.
opportunity, but you also need to know when to say no.
Yes.
And for givers, it's a we kick and scream. And we have to
I'm
say,
like, I want to help
I
you.
want
Let
to
me
help
help
you.
you. Like,
Yeah.
I gotta have boundaries. Gotta have
Yeah.
boundaries.
And my second hard lesson was you can't do it by yourself. Um, so you have to hire a team around you. And the team might not look like you. It might not be all males, might not be all females, might not be all black, all white, um, all HBCU graduates.
Right.
But if you're looking to grow, hard lesson, because there was a point where I would have done trainings and my wife and I would be traveling and back and forth, and I would literally not have enough time to submit the invoice.
Okay.
It's
Because you
just,
were just still working so much, like on your next speaking role.
or you're just tired.
Okay,
Um,
got it.
so both of those things, but to grow at the space that you or me want to really honor God with our gifts, you need a team. And I couldn't use PayPal anymore. I couldn't text people to confirm dates. I need to use email. I have QuickBooks. I mean, I had to use systems
Right.
that make you professional. I couldn't have my high school Hotmail account as my main email. You know what I'm saying? So I had to like level up. And I think about two zones, comfort zone and stretch zone.
Right.
And where I used to live was in the comfort zone. Where I live now is the stretch zone. And so every day, Carol, it's exciting as life can be, with business, I am trying to stretch and grow every day. But the hard lesson was you can't do it by yourself. You got to have a team. So that I learned that the hard way too, because I would get emails and calls to do things, and I realized at the end of the day, God, I shouldn't email Carol at 1 a.m. Should I? Should I not? It's unprofessional. Um, so now I have assistant. I've got folks who can speak on my behalf. I've got folks who can help me secure venues and things like that. So you need a team. You need a team. Hard lesson.
Yes, that is something that my sister, who is a systems business owner, she's an awesome, amazing expert, has been saying to me for over a year, Carol, you got to do things differently. So thanks to her, I have done things differently, but I'm have a ways to go in terms of getting more automation with my things. Because I'm like, Melanie, I just, I know you're saying do it, but I'm too busy doing my actual like passion to like think about even getting started. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that is so true. Have
Yeah.
help because you can't do it alone. So
No.
you mentioned the comfort zone and the stretch zone. So as you keep on growing in your business, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Oh man. I see both of my girls in school or have graduated by then. Um, I did a fathers and sons conference for 5 years, 2015 to 2019. And I stopped doing it. COVID was one reason, but I was exhausted, you know. It was some of the best work I've ever done. So I see myself being in that position. I don't know if it's the conference,
Mhm.
but pulling people together to have this conversation. Um, I'd spent most of my time with you today talking about my father, but my mother and I had issues also. Um,
Mhm.
and it was respectful at all times, but there were things that were said and done that were hurtful to me. Um, so the two things that I've been really leaning in on, Carol, have been compassion fatigue because of my experience. And
Mhm.
I did a training on Friday about this. So I wanted to develop that to help people. And the other thing is just the space of grace and forgiveness. I took my mom to DC first time she flew in April. And
Oh yes, I saw those photos. I was
yeah,
like, whoa, this is so beautiful. They're here in DC exploring.
it was, and I took my sister with me also, but it was an opportunity for her and I to have a conversation. And one of the things that a lot of us, but I'll just speak for myself, struggle with, which is how do you tell her honestly how some things hurt me? Um,
Right.
and my mother, she's 75. She's the oldest of 16. Um, she was firm, bro. She was firm. When we were little, didn't play no games. And she was a spanker in the house.
Mhm.
We're in DC. She wanted to go to DC. I did everything first class. To drive her. I mean, it was beautiful weather. And one particular night, we were sitting down talking, and I just asked her, "When was your favorite birthday?" And she said, "I didn't have no favorite birthday." She said, "I was raising your uncles and your aunts." So I asked her about, and God bless her, and this is not going to embarrass her because she knows how I feel about this, but we were called things like dumb and stupid as kids, right? Um, I asked, "Where did you learn how to cook biscuits like this?" And she was telling us about my great grandmother, my grandmother's mother.
Right.
She was telling these stories, and in the stories, she would talk about how my great grandmother referred to her, which was dumb and stupid, right? So, cycles do one thing. Um, And what I learned in the conversation was, as I tried to get her to acknowledge that she hurt me, um, she denied it. She said, I never said that. And it's four of us.
Wow.
We all have the same remembrance of these things.
Right.
And I did a talk on how do you handle life when the person that owes you an apology doesn't apologize. And what I left with is a deeper love for my mother after this conversation. I'll tell you why, because my counselor is who put me up to do this.
Okay.
'Cause I've been talking about it for such a long time. And what I learned is most of us as parents, we do the best we know how. And my mother, through all of those years of instability with my dad, and um, they used to fight when before I was born. My mom tells a story of, they would have old school Ike and Tina situations. And for her to be at church every Sunday and to make sure that we were at football practice on time and to make sure that we ate and to make sure that we had our clothes ironed, I grew an appreciation for her, but she didn't apologize. And so that's where forgiveness enters the chat.
Yeah.
Um, that's where grace enters the chat. And this phrase I heard some time ago has kind of been the underpinning of this next chapter.
Mhm.
And as I've been talking about this in conversations with people, it's more people who have had this dynamic than less people with their parents.
Right. You're
Um,
right.
and so this phrase that has been kind of the underpinning of this is it says it's hard to hate something that you understand. And so for me, it's going to be a continuation of loving on my mom, um, because she's went through a lot, right? Now, did things hurt then? Is that still element still unresolved, so to speak? It still is fresh. But I've agreed to accept the reality of what she understands to be what she did. She didn't we didn't miss any meals. My mother worked for white families. Most of the clothes that we had when I was a young boy, they weren't purchased, they were secondhand from these families, but we were still together. So in this next 5 years, fatherhood is still my first love. So this is all connected. But I definitely see this compassion fatigue conversation entering my work, and definitely this stream around forgiveness. It's so many, and I'm not healed. I'm healing from things
Right,
in my past, but I have recognized in my work the number of people that are walking around wounded, um, and getting in relationships and having babies, and doing very successful things, but addressing this like rock in their shoe is kind of messing up you know, their walk a little bit. So
right,
I'm not a minister, I'm not a pastor, but I've heard the clear calling to take the things that made pain for me become purpose. And those two things, I don't know where they're going to take me, honestly, Carol, but those two things have been on my heart and it's been in front of me. So fatherhood, obviously, but that compassion fatigue piece to get people from going beyond the scope of their boundaries, but also this whole mother father dynamic around forgiveness is it's huge. It's huge. So, and just be honest. I'm very transparent about it because I get invited to places to speak, and people think I have this like this perfect story. I'm like, bro, I've had to work to get to a space where grace is at the front of my life. Forgiveness
right.
is at the front of my life. So I'm just grateful. But that's what I see but it could be totally different because God is doing this. So
To seeing what happens as you grow, regardless of whether it's compassion fatigue, whether it's working with moms and dads. So I'm here for all of it.
yeah.
So, how can people find out more about your work? Because you're working with a lot of different organizations, you have your business as well. So, how do folks find out more about you and maybe how to even book you?
Yeah. My website is Global Partners FF as in fathers and families.com.
I
Global
will
Partners
link that above.
FF.com. And on social, my area code when I was a kid in South Carolina was 803. So you see Patrick Pat with one T 803. That's on most of the platforms. And then social media on Facebook, it's you'll find me, Patrick Patterson. But any of those things lead you back to the website. So I would say globalpartnersff.com is the place to start.
Okay, I'll make sure that I have that linked in the video and description. I'll put it on the screen either here or
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. You're doing amazing, Carol. You're doing
Oh,
amazing.
thank you so much. And
Um,
so I am just so happy we were able to connect because we talked about fear a little bit earlier. So I have had this fear of guests saying no because I mean I am not a journalist. I don't say I am one. I don't act like I'm one. I'm not in that field. I don't have a huge social media or following on YouTube. So I'm thinking, okay, I have this passion for giving light to others who deserve just to have the story heard, and then in turn, I can also help others. So I was thinking, okay, well, Patrick's been really busy. He's traveling, so let me just ask him, thinking that hopefully you would say yes. But honestly, back in the spring, I was thinking, you were like, Carol, I'm busy. No. And so when you say yes, I was like, this is amazing. So I know that was scheduling, that was a challenge for us, but I definitely want to thank you for your patience as well, because it's been a long ways from the spring to where we are now. But I'm definitely happy that I've been able to stay in touch and just keep this going. So I'm definitely looking forward to all that you have to share. And so y'all, if you are someone who has experienced maybe a challenge with your father and they are still living, I really encourage you to try to break down those barriers and just to humble yourself, soften your heart, to just maybe ask your father, what is your story? Because that then may in turn help you. And then if you have children, that can also help them too. So it is full circle. And again, I'm looking forward to all that you have to share. Do you have any final words, Patrick?
No, just thank you. It's all I have. I mean, this is always rich for me because it's my passion. But listen to you, I'm excited about what's to come, Carol.
Oh, thank
With your
you.
book, with the interviews, with even some of the things you hadn't even thought about doing, they're going to
Mhm.
happen. So stay connected to people that make you feel good and do good and do good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So I'm just hold on quick. So thank you everyone for joining us on First and 15th, and we'll see y'all next time.